Preparations for the conquest of Gaza City continue, as Hamas operatives are making their own preparations for the IDF operation, and Israel's Air Force is hitting them in the middle of their preparations against us. This includes a strike that terminated the terrorist who called his parents on the middle of October 7th, the massacre, to brag about murdering 10 Jews, and we'll have more details about that. And meanwhile, the IDF is continuing to send signals to Gazans that it's time to evacuate the city for their own safety, and have set up a humanitarian zone to the south for that purpose. However, there are concerns that Hamas will use the movement of people as a cover to move more hostages into the city to be used as human shields. And speaking of human shields, Hamas published a video over the last weekend of Guy Gilboa Dalal, who was kidnapped on October 7, 2023, as well as an apparent first documentation of another Israeli hostage, Alon Ahel. And meanwhile, the IDF struck a high-rise building used by Hamas terrorists who were preparing for the maneuver of the forces in the area after the IDF spokesperson in Arabic published a new evacuation notice to the residents of that area. And on the diplomatic front, Spain has instituted a full arms embargo on Israel and is considering declaring Prime Minister Netanyahu as persona non grata. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host Yair Pinto, and with me today is Mati Shoshani, and together we are bringing you all the truth about what's happening in Israel. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, spoke over the weekend about the achievement regarding Hamas and the option of bringing the organization back to the negotiating table by a military threat. He also announced that Hamas is under pressure from the prospect of the conquest of Gaza City. Meanwhile, the Hamas terrorist organization and its official, Mahmoud Afana, who is notable for having called his parents in the middle of the participation of the October 7 massacre and proudly told them that he has just murdered 10 Jewish people, was terminated in an IDF strike over the weekend, and we'll tell you some more details about that. And amidst all of this, the IDF has declared a humanitarian zone in Khan Yunis and called on the residents of the city in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip to join the thousands who have already left. An IDF announcement in Arabic said it is possible to move now to the area quickly and by vehicles without inspection. Take advantage of the opportunity to join there as soon as possible. The safe zone includes field hospitals, water infrastructure, and medical equipment, and according to a list published on Sunday by the coordinator of government activities in the Palestinian territories, there are tents, food, and other supplies that will be provided to the Palestinians that choose to evacuate. The IDF hopes to push the residents of Gaza City, several 100,000 of them, southward towards Khan Yunis, in order to prevent them from being used as human shields by Hamas in the battle for Gaza City. And elsewhere, during a week of night operations in Judea and Samaria, the IDF and the Shin Bet fighters arrested 70 wanted persons, seized 19 weapons, and destroyed explosive charges. The operation continues in many villages across the area. In Israel's northern arena, the Lebanese government issued a statement that the National Army would collect the weapons from Hezbollah, but published a vague plan with no clear timetable. TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will take us to what is happening in the Islamic Republic of Iran, from the 12-day war with Israel to the shortages of water and electricity, making life miserable for millions of ordinary people. And despite assessments in Israel, the regime in Iran is not expected to fall anytime soon. But Mati will bring us all the information on why Iran is assisting the Houthis in developing chemical weapons. Also, Iran is trying to rehabilitate its defensive systems and its missile capabilities after the Israeli strikes, and is joining with China in order to rearm, while the United States State Department, which has already prevented senior Palestinian Authority officials from entering the US, intends to complicate or forbid participation also for delegations from Iran, Sudan, Zimbabwe, and Brazil in the United Nations General Assembly gathering. There was also more bad news for Iran closer to home, as Iran asked Iraq for easing at the border crossings to Syria for transferring funds to Hezbollah, but Iraq rejected, while the United States monitors the flow of millions of dollars to the terrorist organization. Mati will have all the details for us about this. And meanwhile, President Donald Trump said this Saturday in a conversation with reporters at the White House that the United States is in the midst of a very deep negotiation with Hamas on a deal for the release of hostages and a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. According to him, his message to Hamas is, release everyone immediately and then much better things will happen for you. But if you do not release them, the situation will be hard and unpleasant. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and with me is Mati Shoshani, and this is your Boots on the Ground report with all the truth about what's happening in Israel on day 702 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are operating under the orders of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And guys, a moment before we begin, I want to call on you to stand together with Israel. And when I say guys, I mean guys and gals. All of us, we need to unite to stand together for the truth. Every day we hear terrible lies that are funded by extremist regimes around the world, and we at Boots on the Ground are on the front lines of public diplomacy in order to give you the truth about what's happening in Israel. So, if you want to help us, share our content, leave a comment, hit the like button, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button and that donate button to help us create more content from Israel on what's happening. Guys, as part of the preparations for the maneuver in Gaza City, in recent days, the IDF informed the families of living hostages that it intends to ensure that in the operation, hostages will not be harmed, but a military source admitted that it is clear that the operation endangers the hostages. The notice came against the backdrop of the IDF's preparations to enter Gaza City as part of Operation Gideon's Chariots B, and the assessment that there are hostages that are held inside Gaza City. Meanwhile, on Saturday, the IDF, led by the Southern Command, struck a high-rise building that was used by the Hamas terrorist organization in the Gaza City area. And according to the IDF spokesperson's announcement, Hamas installed intelligence gathering means in the building and placed observation posts for the purpose of tracking the location of IDF forces in that area. As part of the preparations for the Hamas terrorist organization, ahead of the maneuver of the IDF forces in the area, the terrorist organization planted many explosive charges near the structure that were intended to harm the forces, and also built underground infrastructure from which the organizations and their terrorists direct activities against the IDF troops. And prior to the strike, steps were taken to reduce the chance of harm to the civilians, including warning the population, use of precision munitions, aerial surveillance, and additional intelligence information. After the strike on the building that was used by Hamas, Arab networks published footage of a Gazan journalist receiving a phone call from Israel, during which he is asked to evacuate another building in Gaza that received a warning prior to a strike. In response, the journalist claims that he is not in the area and is told that the IDF is preparing to demolish the entire building soon. In the IDF spokesperson's announcement, it was written that the terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip systematically violates international law while cruelly exploiting civilian institutions and the population as human shield for terror activities. The IDF will continue to act with force and with determination against the terrorist organizations inside Gaza. And in a related story, Gazan channels reported on Saturday that the IDF eliminated the Hamas terrorist Mahmoud Afana on Friday. This evil man became a symbol of the October 7th massacre because in the midst of the atrocities, he phoned his parents in Gaza and proudly told them about the 10 Jewish people that he had already murdered. The phone call was recorded by IDF intelligence and released publicly to try and convince a skeptical world that these atrocities had in fact occurred. Following his participation in the atrocities of October 7th, Afana lived in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip and moved to its center following the IDF operations. And according to the reports from Gaza, he was eliminated, along with his brother, during a strike that was carried out in the southern Deir el-Balach over the weekend. And meanwhile, ahead of the operation to conquer Gaza City, on Saturday morning, the IDF published the map of the humanitarian area in Khan Yunis, to which they hope to move the civilian population of Gaza City. Ahead of this, the coordinator of government activities in the Palestinian territories published a detail of the humanitarian steps taken so far, including the installation of water and electricity infrastructure, together with the Emirati water line from Egypt to the El Mawasi area in Gaza that is supposed to allow a supply of 15 liters of water per person per day for 600,000 people. Additionally, it was announced that the Kela power line will be connected to 2 desalination plants whose operation is supposed to allow a supply of 26,000 cubic meters of water per day compared to 3,500 cubic meters prior to the line's connection. It was also announced that repair works are being carried out on water lines from Israel that will expand the supply, and additionally, the IDF will allow the regular entry of fuel for the desalination facilities and the operation of water wells. In the area designated as humanitarian, there are 3 institutional hospitals, besides the European hospital that was struck in May during the elimination of Muhammad Sinwar and whose operations were halted. The active hospitals are the El Amal, Suhada, El Aqsa, and Nasser, the last of which was struck by the IDF a few weeks ago. In addition, there are 8 field hospitals and 3 central clinics. Kogat announced that work has also begun for the renewed operation of the European hospital by local and international teams. It was further announced that in the last 2 weeks, over 1,500 tons of medical equipment and medicines were brought in cooperation with international organizations. Additionally, it was announced that initial dialogue has been with medical actors in the northern Gaza Strip for the purpose of formulating plans to relocate infrastructures from the north to the south. An access corridor for the movement of patients and their escorts to the Emirati field hospital is still in the planning stages. It was also announced by the IDF that over 5,000 tents and other housings were brought in cooperation with international organizations and with donor countries. Additionally, it was announced that tens of thousands more tents were recently purchased by air organizations and are expected to enter southern Gaza over the next 2 weeks. The IDF also allows the entry of food by trucks into the Gaza Strip, together with 3 distribution complexes in the southern parts of Gaza. Kogat reported that works are being carried out to establish 2 additional distribution complexes, while airdrops of food packages would be carried out according to the request of the countries in cooperation with Jordan, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and additional countries. So, that's all that is being done to take care of the needs of the Gazan civilians. Now, let's take a look at what's being done to take care of the Israeli hostages that are being held in Gaza. It's important to point out that it is very difficult to predict how Hamas will behave regarding the Israeli hostages, whether they will guard them or use them as shields, or even forbid, murder some of them in order to manipulate the situation for their own benefits. In any case, the IDF intends to act cautiously in places where it assessed that there are hostages, even if terrorists are identified in these areas, and even if the overall price is the non-decisive defeat of Hamas. The IDF is preparing for the hostages to be moved from where they are now, and therefore, the Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir has issued instructions to act cautiously. The transfer of the hostages may be carried out under cover of the movement of the hundreds of thousands who will cross southward in the opposite direction as part of the evacuation of Gaza City in safe corridors into which the IDF will not fire. It should be noted that Hamas has already done this several times during the war, and mostly concealed the faces of the hostages. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to pray for the safety of our hostages who are held in Gaza in the hands of Hamas, and we ask you to continue by spreading the truth, share, and follow us. Most importantly, do not forget to hit that subscribe button and the donate button if you want to support our work, so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, we've talked a lot in this report already about the needs of ordinary Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, the need of aid, medical treatment, and more, and the support that is going into this situation. So today, I want to spend just a few moments to talk about what the ordinary people of Israel need during this war. As the war comes to, hopefully, a conclusion for now, life here in Israel hasn't just been about physical recovery. It's about people trying to rebuild from the ground up. So many hard-working Israelis, including many small business owners and craftspeople, had their lives turned upside down. Some were called to reserve duty for hundreds of days. Others had to leave their homes because they were in the direct line of fire, if it's from Hezbollah or Hamas terrorists. Many lost months of income almost overnight. Now, they're trying to start again by reopening their businesses, restocking shelves, and getting back to doing what they love. But it's not easy. They need help. And that's why Arza exists. Arza partners directly with these small businesses, buying their handmade goods and delivering them in beautiful boxes to homes around the world. Each box helps real families get back on their feet and puts money in the hands of those working hard to recover with dignity, not with charity. So guys, if you want to be part of that effort and get a piece of Israel to your doorstep, go to arzabox.com/TBNIL. And also use the code TBNIL to get an extra 10% off your subscription. Again, that's www.arzabox.com/TBNIL. One box, one family, one step closer to rebuilding. And now we are getting back to the news and staying on the subject of the Israeli hostages, because on Friday, Hamas published a propaganda video of the hostage Guy Gilboa, who has been in captivity since the beginning of October 7, when he was kidnapped together with another hostage. Shortly after the Hamas video was released, the family of Alon Ahel permitted it to be published that Alon is the hostage who appears next to Dalal. In the video, Gilboa Dalal is taken by the terrorist for a so-called ride in a car in Gaza City and meets another hostage in the car. Additionally, he was forced to claim that a total of 8 hostages are held in Gaza City. The Ahel family said in response to the publication of this video about their son, "We were shocked to see Alon's condition. After consultation with eye experts in Israel and around the world, it is clear that Alon does not see with his right eye. The frequent blinking in his eyes indicate severe difficulty to focus and to see over time." In the diplomatic arena vis-a-vis the Hamas terrorist organization, Prime Minister Netanyahu published his first statement since the reports on Hamas's agreement to a partial hostage deal over the weekend. In his statement, he celebrated what is shaping up as an achievement of the pressure policy on the ground in the Gaza Strip, saying Hamas is under atomic pressure. Netanyahu also said that he visited the Gaza division and met with the IDF's senior command staff. And in an address to the citizens of Israel, the Prime Minister emphasized 3 main messages: appreciations for the IDF's achievements in the war of rebirth, an impression from the fighting spirit, and the determination to complete the defeat of the Hamas and the release of all the Israeli hostages. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on all the truth, everything that's happening here in Israel and the Middle East. So guys, if you want to help us, share, follow, leave a comment, and make sure to subscribe to TBN Israel YouTube channel. And now, let's move on to TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani, who will bring us all the new information about the talks between the United States and the Trump administration against the Hamas terrorist organization, and about the plan of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, including reports that they are planning to equip the Houthis in Yemen with chemical weapons. Over to you, Mati.
Thank you, Yair. This is a very, very, very dramatic week for diplomacy. There are a lot of really big moving pieces that are taking place, and the bottom line of all of them is there is a shift and a battle over the power groups in international diplomacy between the U.S. axis and the enemies of the U.S. and Western thought axis. On one side is the U.S. and Israel and several other allies, and on the other side, China, Iran, the Houthis, and several other countries that are sort of aligning with that agenda. Now, the big headlines here are, of course, Israel and Hamas, an incredible push by the U.S. to reach an agreement between Israel, Hamas, and a release of hostages, and some very bold statements made by President Trump that we'll get to in just a second. And on the other side of that is a question of Iran, China, the Russians that are behind the scenes working out a very, very, very delicate change of power where they're trying to challenge the hegemony, the control of the U.S. government over global trade, over global pressure, and over how the UN operates. And in response to that, and we've talked about this for several weeks, the US government has been incredibly strong in both statements and actions against countries in really turning up the pressure on several countries that need to understand that actions have ramifications, that going against the US, going against its agenda in the global sort of arena will carry a substantial price. So let's break these things down. And let's start with the most urgent, the most immediate, Israel, Hamas, and the Gaza Strip. So let me set the stage here. We've been on months and months on end of trying to reach an agreement between Israel, Hamas, the US, that results in the release of all hostages. And in every one of these rounds, the Hamas responds with a very, very resounding yes, that's immediately followed by a but. We will go into an agreement, but we won't actually release the hostages. We will sign an agreement, but we want it to be forever. We will sign an agreement, but Israel has to confess that it started the war. Bizarre statements every time. The last one was a joke, by the way. And in every one of these, Hamas pulls out in the last minute. Now, the US has been trying to work on multiple channels, working through Qatar, working through the Egyptians, working even directly. And now we're back to direct negotiations between the US and Hamas. Now, they're using Witkoff and several other emissaries, all with one big goal: bring a quick deal. And that deal needs to include releasing all hostages, not some of the hostages, not maybe, not one day as they've asked many times before, but all of them, all at once. And this has been the key divisive point between Israel, the US, and Hamas. Hamas is trying continuously to create a drawn-out sort of negotiation in which they never really give back any of the hostages, but Israel ceases fire for months and sometimes even more than that in their request. And in every round of negotiations, the Qataris, the Egyptians, others that have been involved, we always sort of fall over this big deciding factor, which is when do they release the hostages? Now, let me explain why this is important. If they release the hostages in small increments, they never truly will release all the hostages. We've seen them time and time again withdraw from the negotiations last minute or agreeing to a ceasefire agreement as they've done in the past, but then violate the ceasefire agreement, and Israel never really gets back all the hostages that were promised. Israel has insisted, as is the US, that we want all the hostages in the beginning of the ceasefire agreement with Hamas. Now, Hamas have hinted that this might be possible this time around, but then again, they always pull back in the last minute and try to withdraw. And this time around, President Trump, who seems to be losing his temper and his patience on this topic, has said very strongly, as he's said before, by the way, that there will be one big agreement, that the hostages will be released, and that if Hamas refuses to enter this agreement, there will be dire consequences on their end. What does that look like? That looks like them saying, and the US government saying to the Israelis, we back you 100% in fully taking over the Gaza Strip and whatever actions are required. Now, let me remind you that the latest move by the Israeli army and government, in which the Israeli government stated, we are going to take apart the entire Gaza Strip. We're going to remove all of Hamas, and we're going to control all the territory, because otherwise we will never get the hostages back. There is no victory without the hostages. There is no victory without Hamas being fully eliminated and removed as the governing and fighting force that is inside the Gaza Strip. So the Israeli government looks at this and says, we're going for the entire Gaza Strip. We're going to remove Hamas completely. The US government, famously, uniquely in history, has backed the Israeli government time and time again on this exact agenda, facing a very substantial wave of opposition by other governments. In fact, I would even call it a diplomatic wave against Israel and against the American agenda in the Gaza Strip that manifests in many different ways. We won't get into right now. But essentially, the US is the one setting the party line in stating, Israel, we back you in fully dismantling Hamas in the Gaza Strip, fully taking over the Gaza Strip until every last hostage is brought back home. And President Trump has personally stepped in on this matter multiple times, saying, and again, there are reports that talk about how emotional and how much he cares about this topic, stating time and time again, we will bring back every last hostage. And if Hamas refuses, and if Hamas fights us on this, there will be very, very substantial consequences, both in support to Israel, but in possible military action and diplomatic pressure on Hamas. Now, the global community is against this for various reasons, the main one of which is, in my opinion, the fact that they're opposed to American presence and American agenda in this part of the world. It's not even objectively connected to the Americans. It's about them wanting to have their own power. And this is where we get to the next part of this conversation. This conversation that started in the Gaza Strip with Hamas is now sort of trickling down or become almost an avalanche of diplomatic skirmishes taking place between the US and multiple other countries. One of them is, a recent headline talks about the fact that the Houthis, or a minister in Yemen, talks about the Houthis saying, listen, guys, international community, take heed, something's happening in Yemen right now. We think the Houthis are creating chemical weapons. Now, wait a minute, the Houthis don't have the ability to create chemical weapons, so how are we doing this? And here's the real story here. Here's how this is all affecting global diplomacy and global power shifts and alliances. So the story is, the Houthis are allegedly creating chemical weapons. They're creating chemical weapons to harm their own people and possibly be used against others, including Israel. But wait, they're not alone in that. The Iranians are the overloads that back them in technology, in training, in weapons systems. They're the ones that are guaranteeing this. They're the ones that are passing on this technology. But wait, the Iranians are not alone either. The Iranians are part of an axis that is trying to resist US presence and US pressure. Because what is the big move here? The US is trying to reshape the power balance in the Middle East. It fought alongside Israel against the Iranians. It fought against the Houthis on its own earlier in this year. And what the US is trying to bring is a shift of powers in this region where Iran is pushed down in its influence and effect and ability to export violence and evil around this region, where the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris, the Kuwaitis, and a bunch of other countries join in a financial alliance that brings stability and quiet to this region. Several countries look at this and say, we don't like this because this benefits the US. So we're going to back the Iranians, we're going to support them, we're going to give them technology, we're going to help them circumvent sanctions that would be put against them, and we'd even pressure the E3, Germany, France, and the UK, in not imposing the immediate snapback mechanism on Iran to prevent the US from gaining any kind of public opinion, points, and success in gaining more power and control in this region. Who are these countries? China is one of these countries, Russia is one of these countries, and several other countries that are part of their ideological or movement bloc are aligning or getting in line on this agenda. And this is a problem, and it's a problem that the US is opposing openly. How are they opposing it? This is where this story goes from interesting to fascinating. The US has identified that many UN organizations are playing on behalf of the enemy team. They're playing on behalf of the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians. So what have they started doing? They started going after the individuals that are the ones promoting the anti-American, anti-Israel agenda. They're going against members of the UN General Assembly, looking at their visas and their actions. They're looking at UN-related organizations that have been doing things that are way opposed to the UN Charter and UN goals, and starting to think about, do we cut financing? Do we prevent these people from entering into the US? Now, of course, everyone around the world, they look at this and they start yelling, what is the US doing? They're violating all the treaties, etc., etc. Let's talk honestly here. What the US is doing is going after the bad guys who are trying to spread terrorism and violence in this region and cutting off their funding and their ability to move freely around the world. It is the right thing to do. And it's importantly timed to exactly the time where people are trying to align with Iran, allow the Iranians to go back to creating nuclear weapons, And at the same time, we're looking at a sort of watershed line where US agendas in this part of the world, along with Israel, are put to the test by an axis of power that is opposed to the way of Western life and Western thought. People are trying to see if Israel, and more importantly the US, will fight for their agenda, fight for their sort of stake in reshaping this environment that we live in. And now is the time where leadership and governments are truly being measured. They're put to the test of whether or not they will really fight for what's important. And I have to tell you guys, the US has done an incredible job so far in really fighting through the international organizations, using diplomacy against the enemies of Israel, against the enemies of the US. Don't be mistaken, this is a battle over power and over control. There are countries that will do everything in their power, the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, to bring damage to anything that is part of the US agenda in this part of the world. But the US agenda in this part of the world is bringing peace, calm, and trade to this region. So it seems that they're on the right side of history, and these other countries are actively making a stand on the wrong side of history. Let me wrap this up. In summary, we are looking at a global scale shift and battle over power and control. The US under President Trump has really upped its game in its involvement in events taking place in the world, in standing up to the war in Syria and aiding in what's going on there, in standing up to the evil that was Iran and fighting alongside Israel in that war. And now multiple countries, namely the Iranians, the Chinese, and the Russians, are trying to fight over that attempt at control and change in this region. And they're doing so through international organizations, they're doing so through the UN, they're doing so through using diplomacy and through public pressure and the media. And the US has identified what they're trying to do and is really going up against the evil that these countries present. You need to stay on top of everything that's happening because things here are dramatic. I study history on a regular basis, and this is a very dramatic season that we're in that will really shape this region, both the Middle East and global geopolitics, for years and possibly decades to come. And now is the money time to see if the US will be able to stop and create a strong alliance that will push back on Iranian, Chinese, and possibly Russian agendas, or whether they'll be able to sort of sneak their way out of this pressure, as they've done many times in the past, and gain a foothold in the Middle East and a foothold in geopolitics at the expense of the US and its partners. Dramatic weeks, and you guys need to stay on top of everything that's happening here. And the best way to do that is making sure you subscribe, you share, and you like this content, because it makes sure you see every next piece of content and others get to see the truth coming out of this part of the world. Now back to Yair Pinto.
Thank you very much, Mati Shoshani, for the clarity that you always bring to these very complex issues. Guys and girls, as always, we will continue to report about all the truth, boots on the ground style, and we call on you to help us share these videos with as many people as possible. We need your help, so please hit that subscribe button. Now, we are shifting our focus to some of the other fronts in this war. IDF forces, the border police, and the Judea and Samaria District Police, with the assistance of precise intelligence from the Shin Bet, continue a wide scope of counter-terrorism operations throughout Judea and Samaria. And over the past week, the force has arrested no fewer than 70 wanted individuals involved in various terrorist activities. As part of an operation in the Samaria Brigade, 25 wanted individuals were arrested and various weapons were seized, along with explosive devices which were demolished where they were discovered for safety reasons. In one of the notable operations in the village of Azun in the Menashe Brigade area of responsibility, the IDF forces directed the Shin Bet and arrested a central Hamas operative who planned to carry out an explosive attack against Israeli civilians. At the same time, in the village of Katatia, paratroopers and reconnaissance fighters together with brigade forces arrested several terrorists and destroyed an improvised explosive device that was ready to be used against Israelis. In the Etzion, Ephraim, and Binyamin brigades as well, the forces operated in extensive operations, arresting dozens of additional suspects, and in the village of Silwad, Chizme, and Kfar Ein in Binyamin, incitement materials and weapons were confiscated as part of the fight against the dissemination of inciting propaganda materials and calls for attacks against Israelis. All the wanted individuals who were arrested and the weapons that were seized were transferred for further handling by the Shin Bet and the Judean Samaria District Police. The IDF clarifies that the campaign to thwart terror continues day and night with the aim of preventing the next attack and maintaining the security of Israel's citizens. And guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on the terror front of Judea and Samaria. So keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. And most importantly, hit that subscribe button. Despite the decision of the Lebanese government on Friday to approve the plan to continue disarming the Hezbollah terrorist organization, one can learn from the limited response of the Shiites in the country that they are not afraid of harsh steps in the near future. Although the 5 Shiite ministers left the cabinet meeting before the plan was presented, the activists of the organization rode motorcycles in protest convoys in the Dahia quarter in Beirut. But beyond that, the responses suggest that the results of the meeting are perceived as positive for Hezbollah. Hezbollah did not publish an official statement in response to the decision, but a senior official of the organization, Mahmoud Afana, told the Reuters news agency that the cabinet meeting is an opportunity to return to wisdom and reason and to prevent the state from sliding into unknown. Various media outlets in the country and in the Middle East quoted sources in the Lebanese government according to whom the plan includes 4 or 5 stages of gradual geographic progression. First, completing disarmament in the area south of the Litani River, then northward to the El Awali area, and subsequently in the Beirut and El Bika areas. In the media portal Ashraq al-Awsat, it was claimed that the first stage will last 3 months. It was further reported that the plan includes completing steps to disarm the Palestinian refugee camps and a general prohibition of transferring weapons between areas inside Lebanon. However, the essence of the plan and the timetable for its implementation were not published by the government and remained vague. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development on the subject of Lebanon. And guys, we call on you to help us spread the truth. This is as important as fighting in the field. So share this video and make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you remain tuned to what's happening in Israel and know how to pray for the situation. Now, we are moving on to another diplomatic front. A deep diplomatic crisis is occurring between Israel and Spain in recent times following the ongoing war in the Gaza Strip. Madrid is adopting a hardline policy against Israel, frequently making sharp, critical statements against the Jewish state and even threatening several measures. As is recalled, an uproar occurred following a statement made a few months ago by Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, who said then, "We will not engage in trade with a state committing genocide." Spain's ambassador to Israel was summoned for a formal reprimand at the ministry's foreign ministers in Jerusalem following the remarks, and on Saturday it was reported in the leading Spanish newspaper El País that Spain's Council of Ministers is expected to approve this coming Tuesday an unprecedented package of sanctions against Israel. At its center stands a comprehensive arms embargo that will take effect immediately upon its approval. And according to the report, the planned embargo leaves no room for side circumstances and circumventions. It prohibits any sale, supply, transfer, or export of weapons and military technology to Israel, whether directly or indirectly. The ban will apply both to governmental entities and to private companies operating in Spain. At the same time, Spain will also ban the import of any military product that is manufactured in Israel which could harm Israeli defensive industries. Or maybe not, since many NATO countries have placed large orders from Israeli defensive companies in recent years, and many more are being negotiated, so it's not like losing Spain's business is a huge problem. However, beyond the arms embargo, the Spanish steps include dramatic diplomatic moves. And then the second Deputy Prime Minister, Yolanda Diaz, revealed that the coalition composed of the Socialist Workers' Party and the Sumer Electoral Alliance is working to declare Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a persona non grata in Spain, that is, an unwelcome person whose entry into the country is forbidden. The Spanish move even includes steps to sever the diplomatic relations with Israel. According to the governmental sources that are quoted in El País, the coalition is working on a system of steps to sever relations with the Netanyahu regime, a sharp expression attesting to the depth of the crisis in the relations between the two countries. The Summer Alliance, the junior partner in the coalition, is pushing even for a more extreme step, the recall of the Spanish ambassador from Israel. Such a move would constitute a significant downgrading of diplomatic relations and leave Spain without a senior diplomatic representation in Tel Aviv, Israel. If indeed all the planned steps are approved, this would be one of the harshest packages that European state has imposed on Israel in recent years. The full arms embargo, combined with the severing of diplomatic relations and the declaration of the Israeli Prime Minister as unwelcome person, marks a new low point in relations between Jerusalem and Madrid. Now, I have a personal comment to make about all of this. Genesis 12:3 says that God will bless those who bless Israel and curse those who curse Israel. This past summer, Spain was hit with a searing heat wave, which resulted in, among other things, massive wildfires that burned almost 1 million acres of land, destroying agricultural crops, buildings, vehicles, and entire villages. Authorities said that it was the worst fire season in Spain in 30 years. Is it a coincidence that this happened at the time as the government in Madrid was taking these deeply hostile steps towards Israel? Were the terrible fires in France, Portugal, and other European countries, which have also been threatening to recognize a Palestinian state, also a coincidence? Let me know what you think in the comments, guys. In any case, I'd rather always be on God's side. In any case, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development on Israel's situation in the world and continue to bring you all the truth about what's happening in Israel. The most important thing that you should do in this situation is to pray. Let's pray first of all for your leaders, for the leaders of your countries, the leaders of the European countries, to make wise decisions, the leaders of the United States of America and the leaders of Israel. Let's pray for our enemies to start loving on Israel instead of hating the Jewish people. Let's pray for all those innocent lives that are affected by this war, and there are many of those. Let's keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.